Well, it looks like as if everyone would have entered. I officially want to welcome you to a performance lecture today featuring the zone. I repeatedly want to ask you to stay muted and turn off your camera. We'll ask you to unmute yourself later during the discussion. For the moment, um, yeah, if there are people out there watching us spontaneously via YouTube, you're still invited to register via pintofscience.at in order to receive the Zoom invite and being able to interact with us. I also want to officially welcome you to the Pint of Science Festival, taking place in Austria for the very first time. So I'm really glad that you're a part of that experience that the Pint of Science team created for us and the researchers for the very first time, also in an online format. The initiator, Lisa Reschnik, has prepared a little hello to you that I'm going to display now.
Heute ist es soweit. Los geht's mit PINT of Science. Das Ziel von PINT of Science ist, Wissenschaft wieder stärker in der Gesellschaft sichtbar zu machen. Wir wollen die Wissenschaft aus ihrem Elfenbeinturm herausholen und die Bedeutung von Forschung für unsere Gesellschaft hervorheben. Dazu bringen wir 3 Abende lang die Forscher und Forscherinnen der Stadt in die Lokale nebenan. Dort präsentieren sie im gemütlichen Rahmen neueste wissenschaftliche Erkenntnisse und diskutieren deren gesellschaftliche Dimensionen. Unser Publikum braucht dafür kein Fachwissen. Die Vorträge sind an die allgemeine Öffentlichkeit gerichtet und bieten allen die Möglichkeit, mit Wissenschaft in Kontakt zu kommen. So wollen wir gemeinsam die Wissenschaft feiern und wieder für alle greifbar machen. Und natürlich soll das alles auch zeigen, wie viel Spaß wir an der Wissenschaft haben. Das Festival ist 2013 in England gegründet worden und hat sich seitdem in der ganzen Welt ausgebreitet. Inzwischen sind schon 30 Länder dabei. 2019 habe ich die Idee des Festivals auch nach Wien gebracht und von hier weiter in Österreich verbreitet. Dieses Jahr findet es zum ersten Mal statt mit Freiwilligen und Vortragenden aus Wien, Graz und Linz. Und ich hoffe, nächstes Jahr werden es noch mehr Städte sein. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß bei unserem Festival und freue mich auf eure Teilnahme. Prost!
Thanks to Lisa for these welcome words. She's also present here today. So today we're going to experience a work curated by Basak Genova and created by Bronwyn Lace, Markus Neustetter, and Johannes Jäger. For the upcoming minutes, we are invited to fetch a drink, as I said earlier, to stay muted, to turn our cameras off, to sit back and relax and make ourselves comfortable. Although we might prepare ourselves to start feeling a little uncomfortable in our comfort. However, before exploring the zone, I have the great pleasure to display another final short clip to you from our partner project Touch. And I'm especially happy to display it because you might at least recognize 2 of the faces. So enjoy and sign up. All right, so now it's time to finally dive into the zone. we'd be happy, of course, if you'd say something about your experience later on via social media. And if you do so, please don't forget to tag at Pint of Science AT and use the hashtag Pint21. So now I'll hand over to this performance.
A door open.
Every time a living being is born, a world is brought forth. Not breaking any laws of physics, it transcends them, positing its own presuppositions. Every time such a world is born, the universe is extended, its laws altered infinitesimally, and life will never be the same again. Our worlds too, mine and yours, we nudge the course in ways only we can anticipate. Yet we cannot see the worlds of others. We can only catch glimpses through clumsy utterings and gestures. We are visionless, our experience impoverished, our perspective limited by inner dimension blindness.
A window opens.
But we have methods. We are humans, the rational animal, monkey descended from the trees. We are special. We have tools to open windows, allowing us a certain vista, or, as we foolishly believe, an overview. We sit comfortably on a plush sofa that is our inner retreat, and through the workings of science, we build a shared world of knowledge. It is amazing how we all seem to be looking at the same landscape outside, each from a different angle, from a different sofa. And yet, at the same time, the knowledge we build encases our window like a scaffold until it is all we can see. The lush tropical rainforest outside is now obstructed by our construction, law-like, engineered. It keeps chaos at bay. The fundamental laws of physics aren't fundamental. They are fabricated, a scaffold we built to wrap and protect the 10,000 things of the material world. Those things we can comprehend.
A window closes.
So much order gained, so much richness lost, as our gaze averts itself from ourselves to stare at a simulacrum of what was once the real world, that incomprehensible domain. We study the simulacrum, hyper-normalized, more real than real now. Fundamental laws aren't fundamental. All we have is the world we brought forth, our world.
A window opens.
By now, we have convinced ourselves that the scaffold is all there is. We look at tubes, couplers, and wooden boards. That is our world now, a machine. We refine it. It becomes ever more intricate, its metaphor becoming reality. A world of nuts and bolts, a mechanism.
A window closes.
Full transformation is accomplished when we look back at ourselves and all we see is scaffolding, empty space in between. treating ourselves as machines, a clockwork winding itself, a chemical factory fabricating itself, a computer running a program, its code determined before we were born. Our world vanished, no space between the girders and trusses of our construction.
Another window opens.
An unobstructed view, a glimpse of freedom. We lift our obese behinds from the couch of certainty to sniff some fresh air, to get some mental exercise. Our world reasserting itself. From camel to lion to child, we transform, shouting our world at others, because the louder we scream, the more they will understand.
Another window closes.
The moment passes. Puzzled, we are left, annoyed, maybe inspired. Intrusions of inner worlds rattle at our scaffold, only perceived as echoes, ripples from another dimension. Vexing disturbances. How difficult it is, negative capability, being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason.
Another window opens.
Only the strongest souls stare into the abyss. It's nothing but turtles all the way down. And we begin to fill this emptiness also with structure. The scaffold is fancy this time. Art Nouveau, not functionalism. And through the grid of undulating vanities, we scream our world into the void so that somebody would understand or buy the trite flowery shit we've created from the empty bottom of our hearts.
Another window closes. A window opens.
Now someone had a fabulous idea. That functional scaffold, it's ugly, but functional. People should use it, but they don't like it. The other scaffold, however, is pretty, but useless. People like it, but they can't use it. A practical mind will certainly notice that we can combine the two.
A window closes. Another window opens.
In search for depth, appeal, or authority, it does not really matter. We weld ornamentation onto function. While superficially appealing, the result does not seem to satisfy anyone for long. You can't dress up a turd either way, or so they say. But new combinations must be pursued mindlessly, mistaking combinatorial explosion for creativity. What was the point again? Nobody seems to remember anymore.
Another window closes.
And so the two scaffolds are forced onto each other, increasingly encapsulated by useless metal ornamentations, helplessly disconnected through couplers that won't couple. We silently suffocate. looking for understanding and recognition, we have lost all meaning somewhere on the way. Instead, we build ever fancier scaffolds in the hope to end all scaffolding forever. On our quixotic quest for the scaffold that bridges the void, we have forgotten that the void is only the space where the scaffold isn't. When we will finally have filled the last of this space with function and beauty, there will be no more room for us.
A crack opens in the wall. Tiny ray of sunshine filters in.
Up, from the couch you slouch, let's have a look. There are spaces beyond our scaffolds and our walls. We have not even begun to notice them. We must reconsider how we opened those windows in the first place. Camel to lion to child, we opened those windows through play. And the longer we played, the more sophisticated the rules, the more possibilities open for us, and vice versa. In the heat of our frenzied play, some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. We were lost in play. So down with the rules. Is this art? Is it philosophy? Is it serious? Is it real? Is it useful? Is it pretty? I, for one, I do not care. Down with those walls.
The crack opens a tiny bit wider.
Negative capability indeed. All we've done so far, and all we are currently doing, is deconstruction. If we tear all the scaffolding down, all the walls, there will be nothing left of the house. It'll rain onto the couch, and mold will grow, clouding our minds in a fog of fungal spores. Negative capacity, at least we know now what we don't want.
A new window opens.
Construction is so much harder than demolition. Where to begin? A manifesto. Dude, that's so last century. Just another scaffold to encase us. You know, new shit has come to light. Creation is a process grounded on the collapse of possibilities through choice. When to choose, what to choose, why choose? Agonizing. Too many options. Let's procrastinate.
A new window closes.
Paralysis. Given a choice, we choose not to act. The choice of non-action is also a choice. Negative capacity. Creativity requires leisure, but there is no time. Our scaffolds are breaking down. We sweat profusely. The crack in the wall is widening. Pinned to our couch, chaotic light imprints flickering sunspots onto our readiness.
Another window opens.
Into the void, hole in the sky, solitude, paranoid, It's all right. We must fill the emptiness beyond our scaffolds, our walls. There is so much of it to be filled. How do you make a world? How do you build a house without fixed scaffold? Where do you start? What is the most fundamental truth worth re-examining? Surely it is this, the burning question of connection between the world we bring forth and the jungle out there that once bore us. That connection must still exist for each and every one of us. Why else would we not have died and still be around? It's as simple as that. The most important thing is to relearn to open windows, our windows, and to see through the void behind the window pane.
Another window closes.
Eureka! It is not the window that connects us to the world beyond. It is the act of opening it to look outside.
A new window opens.
And so we enter the zone without a scaffold, but not without a plan. Goal precedes opportunity, opportunity precedes action, action precedes goal. And in predicative generator, it is all we need. World making is a process that presupposes itself. Just like you and me, making worlds is what we do. So tell me, what will the world you make be made of?
A new window closes. Nobody is sitting on the couch anymore. A door closes. One by one, many new windows appear.
Thanks so much. This was The Zone, a collective effort to define a third space beyond those of the arts and sciences. In just a moment, we encourage you to ask questions or tell us your thoughts. You may do so via the chat or digitally raise your hand, or just turn on your mic and talk to us. But first of all, there is an immediate response by the curator, Basha Kshinova.
I tried to write its script after it's being staged. Alexis told me that my script can change the perception. It can change the memory. It can change the meaning. But how can I overwrite this lecture without changing or imitating it? How can I implement my script to a performance that was already ended? Can I go back in time in circles? Alexis appears over and over in many documents and records across different time slices and geographies. Can I coexist in multiple times just like Alexis? How about the encounters that would deny some particular existences? Like mine. What if I get lost in the language of this lecture? Each language has the potential to function as a mechanism of concealment. I'm stuck at the corner now. The shortcut out must be the curatorial technique of closure. So I can escape again.
I will now open the floor for your responses, reactions, and questions. We'll have a look into the chat to see whether some of you want to raise questions there. I'll leave the hello to everyone. Now you actually see the faces of the people behind this performance. All of them being happy to react to your thoughts and questions. I'll open the floor now, leaving Bashak's video uncommented for the moment, and asking you, Bronwyn, as one of the artists involved on the project, we've seen you opening and closing a couple of windows in the past minutes. I'd be very curious to get to know how your room viewed from that comfortable sofa looks like being an artist. Do artists ever rest on comfortable couches in their work?
Oh yeah, I think they do. I think that the best ideas usually hit you in those like moments just before you wake from a nap, or just as you're falling asleep. So I hope that artists rest, because I certainly do. I think that's when the brain is doing some really interesting work and reflecting in a really interesting way. So yeah, you know, these are just pieces of paper and a little bit of ink. So it's great that you see them as windows. I think that they become these little kind of portals and these little objects that I can't quite control. The work that I can really do with them is when they're closed. That's when I can manipulate and massage. And but I'm always left with an element of chance and an element of surprise. And I find it a very interesting exercise for getting into a particular way of making.
Thanks a lot. So what do you actually see when you look outside the windows of your discipline? What is out there for you and for your work?
That's a big one. Yeah, I see an opportunity, I think, to be in these sorts of dialogues, which tend towards a kind of a richness. And I am absolutely invested and believe in my discipline. I know the power of the artistic process. I understand it in relation to its greater context and communities. And yet I would love to see the contemporary arts across the disciplines working in a more deliberate and intertwined way with other disciplines. And I think the sciences is one that I've always been drawn to. So yeah, I think that's how I'd answer that.
Thanks so much. Now there is a first question from the audience. Benji, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this really nice performance presentation. I had a kind of a question that is a bit for each of you, because you come from different disciplinary fields. And you're talking about this third zone, and you're talking about a type of perception that where things are always in, if I understand correctly, in movement. Kind of things change all the time, so we have to reinterrogate everything, living in a society where people attach themselves so much to things. And how in your disciplines, in your respective disciplines, do you kind of open through your works, open a space where we can have this type of perception that can always question things? So what is this zone, this third space, and how is it built? How do you see it built in order to create this perception in movement and in flux?
I'm not going to answer this first, but I wondered if we could ask the audience, those who are comfortable, whether they can show us their faces. I think it would be great to have everyone in the room.
So since Bronwyn doesn't want to answer this, I can maybe start from the point of view of a scientist. And your question is very good. How do you do this? It's very, so one point of this project is that it's very difficult to survive in the institutional frameworks that we've created, both in arts and the sciences, if you're really questioning in this way, right? And so if you're actually trying to do something new, that's always been a difficult task, of course, because generally institutions tend to be conservative. But what is happening lately is that we've sort of put a lot of pressure on not just scientists, but everyone everywhere in society, including the arts, to produce, and that makes it especially difficult to break through. And so what we're trying to create here is not just a space, but also sort of a form of organization, a process. It has to be a process, right? So it cannot be another scaffold like the image we were using before, and try to come up with ways of organizing something like that. I think we have very little experience with that.
I can say a few words. I mean, first of all, I think it was a bit obvious from Yogi's answer, and what Yogi was saying in the text was it's the act of opening. So, I mean, of course, he's talking about the process, but I also think that with the zone, I mean, our attempt to define a zone is also about the perception. I mean, it's not really about finding the two disciplines or 3, 4, 5 disciplines together. It has been done, and it has been done for many centuries even. But the idea is more about how do we change our perception or change our viewpoint to see new associations, and also to maybe see how our perception is being altered or transformed by going through different modes of knowledge, and also by going through different readings of knowledge. So this is the moment for me that is more about associations and more about your perception and more about I don't know, how can we revisit once again and again and again different, I mean, same concepts, but with different mindsets? Maybe this is what is needed now as well, not only in the art field, but elsewhere as well, for each and every, you know, bothering subject that is haunting us all through the day, let's say.
That was a bit my point with this question of like, okay, being in the middle of a kind of very violent situation right now in Palestine, where at the core of it, there are some things that like memory, that how can we like have an approach where we can revisit memory? How can we create those spaces in order to heal something? Because many people are still attached to the scaffold in a sense, or to the image that the scaffold built. And so this is why I asked, in your respective disciplines, how do you see that we can start creating a way that we change our perception and we can...
If I may add something, the challenge has been in this discourse between art and science all this time is with the intention of changing perception and collaboration and all of these things, has been that in my experience to date, there's always been the magical moment where something else happens, and it usually happens in that moment of vulnerability and uncertainty. That comes through entering into each other's disciplines, but not trying to mimic, borrow, steal from them, but actually trying to, for a moment, look at what world making could be within the in-between spaces of that uncertainty and the vulnerability. So in other words, the scaffold reference, yeah, as one's sketching and drawing scaffolds, and one realizes actually that the scaffold is nothing but a line that connects to another line that connects to another line, and it's the form that it takes. one starts to question the very line itself that you're drawing and erasing it and redrawing it and erasing it and redrawing it. And I then start to question the medium that I use as an artist in order to try and bring my story across. And over the last year, spending time, for example, with Bashak, Yogi, Bronwyn, exploring ideas and trying to understand what this zone could be and what this third space could be that sits outside of the silos of art and science the way we understand them, and at the same time borrows and steals from them, I guess. I'm constantly on edge. I'm constantly aware of the fact that I don't know where it's going and that I don't know if I'm comfortable with not knowing what I'm doing. Being immersed in a text that Yogi sends me about evolutionary biology or something like that, I need to read the page 15 times just to get to the first paragraph. And I think there's something quite intriguing about the knowledge that it creates and me rereading it in a completely different way and then reflecting on it with a drawing and sending it back to him. And I think that dialogue and exchange does ask the question of how we actually measure the success of our encounters and our world making, especially in today's times. Coming back to what you were saying, Benji, we're caught in a trap where we have to seem to be relevant all the time, but actually I believe that in our process of making as artists, we are constantly in that vulnerable state and we are constantly relevant. It just depends on from which perspective you see it. That would be my response to, yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that's urgently needed in the sciences, I think, right now.
There's a nice remark by Janet.
Yeah, should I will just read it out. So thanks Janet for the comment. She I don't know. Just a thought. To truly create new perspectives in art and knowing, sometimes it is helpful to enter an altered state of consciousness. Such a state embodies liminality, vulnerability, and the possibility of seeing beyond the scaffold. So again, the term vulnerability is raised. And yeah, Marcus, maybe coming back to your image of the scaffold and this process of building and demolishing, I question myself where you're gonna go with the zone. Do you feel comfortable taking your time and experiencing, or do you feel an urge to create something? So how do you apply your principles of staying vulnerable to your own project?
I think finding the form is probably the most difficult part because one can express ideas, one can stay in that vulnerable state, one can get on and off the couch the whole time, but actually creating something that embodies and holds what the zone could be is the biggest challenge for me personally as an artist at the moment. And the biggest fear is for someone to ask in this forum, so Marcus, what are you making for the zone? Because essentially the process that we're going through is quite intangible and at the same time requires as much production as possible in order to find the form. So making mistakes, experimenting and deleting the experiments are all part of that process. So I think you saw that in the drawings that were happening in the background, that those drawings were a lot about the erasure of ideas that I've drawn before. Yeah.
Sticking to that metaphors or analogies of the windows and doors, is there then actually a difference between having the curiosity to open windows and glimpse outside, which is already brave or might be brave, but is the elevated step to even open the door and step outside? Maybe Bronwyn, because you also opened the door once. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think, we're ambitious and we absolutely want to manifest things in the world and in a way that that does actually sit in this third context comfortably. I think I just wanted to comment on Janet's comment on that vulnerability and pick up on Marcus's point. just as a little anecdote, the four of us in these last months of co-thinking, which has been pretty rigorous and has been a continued conversation, have all had moments of deep collapse in front of one another about our validity in the project. Where suddenly there's momentum between two of us and somebody else is off on their own pluck and they're creating, and the fourth wheel is like, I don't know why I'm here and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know what I can bring to this. I'm lost in the conversation. And it's been really, those for me have been some of the kind of seminal growth points for us. So we've witnessed, I think, firsthand the productivity of that vulnerability and the collapse and the insecurity that comes with it. And so as we start to develop outside of the door and outside of this safe space that we've created for ourselves with each other, it'll be interesting if we can maintain some of that quality and include others in that particular quality, because I think it is a quality that is very rare and extremely generative.
Beautifully said. Before handing over to Eagle, one last thought or question to you. So what happens to us if we don't step outside this door voluntarily? What about the crack in the wall? Is it going to widen anyways? Are we going to lose the safe roof of our disciplines?
Maybe I can say something to that, because this is happening, right? I mean, we are running against the wall. The problem is we're caught in a trap that happens because of this short-term pressure for productivity. That, you know, I've for my research worked in evolutionary sort of processes that get stuck in local maxima if they have too much, you know, if there's too little recombination, for example, and so you get stuck on a little hill of fitness and you can't get off. And this is what our entire society is getting itself trapped in. And these are very sort of, Benji was bringing up all these sort of problems that we're facing right now. There is some sort of underlying generator for all these different crises that are happening at the same time. So this trap we're in is a very multidimensional trap, right? So we need to sort of start at the very beginning with the sort of processes in which we engage in this project. I think we're converging onto something that, as Bronwyn said, is very much based on first of all trying to understand the other. But, you know, that's not enough. It's just a dialogue is you know, if we understand each other, then we have to find a way forward. And this has been really interesting. And I think truly interdisciplinary interactions like this one are really valuable this way. I think it was Conrad Hal Waddington who said it's art and science collaborations should be like flexing your mental joints. They shouldn't just be, you know, often scientists think, oh, let the artist do some outreach or illustration for me. That's terrible. Or the opposite, there's a movement called artistic research, where artists often just sort of copy research methods from the sciences to seem more serious. You know, the economists have done that a long time ago, and it's not gone very well for them either. So this is not the thing we want to do. We really want to try and understand the different points and see if we can go in a certain direction based on that understanding, but not necessarily a consensus or that we have to all become the same, of course, right? We stay different, but we work as a collective in this sort of way as an ongoing process. And that's why we're happy that nobody asked the question what we're going to produce yet, because the main thing is that this is a process that's ongoing, and what is going to be produced is sort of coming out of that.
So there's a question from the audience. Please just unmute yourself and talk.
Hello, sorry if my camera doesn't work well. It's been very interesting. Thank you so much. I would like briefly to reconnect to the initial graphics that were so intriguing me about touch, ethics of touch, and how touch is relevant at this point for the research and so on. And I don't know if it's a question or if it's a song, but it's towards Johannes. Like in terms of touch, of course, there is the aesthetical aspect of touch. And in terms of aesthetics, there is no invalid perception, or there is no unethical perception of touch. It's subjective and it's absolutely liquid in a way. But from the scientific point of view, we well know that as soon as touch is used in a certain way, the ethical review committee is going to slice you to bits. So I am absolutely thrilled by the connaturation of aesthetics and ethics, where the two paradigms have a lot of conflictual dialogues between them. And this is also what excites me, like as Johannes said, to copy to mimetically a method and bring it into art, it's probably not the most exciting part. But to understand all those frictions and conflicts, that is very interesting. So Johannes, I'm throwing you this ball. Do you have anything to say about it?
I'll keep it very short because this is actually a side project outside the zone, and Marie, who is moderating here, is the initiator of that. And so what we wanted to do is very similar to the process we have in the zone. Again, I'm really into deliberative processes here. This is something that comes out of political philosophy and the political practice, where it's a new form of moderating, facilitating discussions that are based on first understanding where the others come from, but then wanting to move forward. I mean, there's this sort of tendency in a lot of circles to just tell each other the stories that we have and then say, oh, this is all beautiful, and now we hold hands and we're never going anywhere. So this is going one step further and is trying to resolve those tensions, but not to resolve the differences between people, so that everybody can come up, not with an end product, like a set of rules or a set of products, a set of exhibitions, but a bunch of values and procedures to which we want to stick to go at a certain problem. So we go from, we take our focus from the end product of something to the process itself. So I'm really happy to talk more about this, but I want to give time back to the discussion about the zone here.
Thank you.
Yeah, please sign up, contact us. Another arts, science, philosophy, something. Bashak, let's come to your immediate response that we saw. You as a curator, is it usual for you to try to position yourself in a collective effort that you're actually curating?
Like, not in this way, I can say, because like, I'm a curator and designer, and I have really very sharp borders between being an artist or a designer, being a curator or an artist. So what I can say is that from the beginning, the zone is all about very challenging kind of undertaking that all of us are being challenged to be detached from our comfort zones and to be pushed to a domain that we are not familiar with. And for me, it's a learning process, but at the same time, with the response, as you see, like, it's ironic for sure, but like, it's also ironic that a curator is chasing and running and she's late to response or even to integrate to the process. Then she's giving her response later. And of course, like, in this time, like, it's also questioning, what does it mean to integrate? Because I'm also talking about, there's a collective timing, and every act of integration, of course, it can be influenced by other external factors, but the act of integration is based on or started with a deliberate decision. And so what does it mean to have a deliberate decision to integrate something, but then you're integrating whatever you are integrating to? Of course, you have to start rewriting a protocol together. Otherwise, you can never succeed to communicate. So within this entire like scene, art comes into this place. And what I really like about art is that it's not the arbitrariness I'm talking about, but it's the power of it. Like, because it uses other tools and other powers to convince, or to not to convince, but to underline things that we have never noticed before, or it brings like other ways or other strategies so that we can cope with life, or like, so that, like, these are, I'm talking a little bit schizophrenic at the moment, I realized, but what I'm saying is that was a very challenging process from the beginning, but at the same time so rewarding. So like, as Bronwyn was underlining, like we, all of us collapsed more than one time, saying that, like, I got lost, I cannot find my way during this voyage. And we are still in the beginning of this journey, I must say, because we have a long plans for the future. And before I talk further, I want to maybe give the ground to Marcus, who was a bit silent tonight, because I'm so sure that he can also say something about this domain and the zone and the comfort zone, and also how to integrate. Yes, Marcus.
Well, can I just say, from artist to curator, and those of you that have worked with curators in your life and are artists, it's that tension as well that is so exciting in this project. Benji's smiling; he knows what I mean. I think that's the dialogue and the comfort zone that one finds oneself in when one's producing something, as I said before, in a vulnerable state or in a planned state, it doesn't matter, gets framed, gets positioned, gets spoken about, gets written about, and you kind of lose control of what you're doing. You kind of lose control of what you've made and your thoughts that you've had and the way that you're presenting it, because it gets juxtaposed with other things. And as does the work of the curator, I'm not denying that, but I think in this case, Bashak, it was really interesting for me to have that dialogue with you, where you're challenged by the creative process that you've been put through, as I'm being challenged in curating something that we're doing together. You know, so I think there's this interesting mix of our disciplines within the art silo, so to speak. But both of us feeling, and I'm including you, Bronwyn, because yeah, we were all in this as artist curator dialogue, all of us feeling at the same time that because it's so boundaryless almost in terms of the experimentation, that we, all three of us at the same time, come to the edge of the scientific pursuit and the scientific questions, and then start all our definitions of who we are as artists and curators fray anyway, because I think it's a very different concept. So I'm enjoying the fact that we've, for ourselves, kind of disjointed and taken apart all of these definitions that we find ourselves in our daily practice as artists, curators, scientists, when we're together in one group. And in that sense, I think tonight for me was a beautiful celebration of also putting Yogi in the deep end, and asking him to be the artist tonight, which is such an interesting turning everything on its head. Yeah.
Yeah, Yogi, how did you actually feel being the talking head, performing almost? Was this within your comfort zone?
Yeah, it's really weird. I never read lectures. Now that I do increasingly more philosophical work, there are people at philosophical conferences who literally, they say they read their paper, and they actually do this. They come with an iPad nowadays and they read their paper, and they speak in paragraphs, not sentences, so you don't understand. So this was one challenge, was to read the text. The other challenge was to write this text, because it's very much, I want to, put a set of references after each statement that I make, and write in very long and jargon heavy language. And this was really cool. I could play with words, but as Bronwyn said, it sounded a bit like Dr. Seuss at the end. So you wonder, is this gonna be completely ridiculous, or is it gonna be does it work out? And it's been a really interesting experience this way. I wouldn't call myself a performer quite yet, but the other thing is we wanted to have this sort of level tone of the text, and I'm a very animated speaker when I speak without a script. So if I would put some animation into the text, it's really bad acting. That's what we discussed. And so so you have to recognize your limits as a performer, although you do give talks all the time. And it's been a really interesting personal experience.
If I may quickly, Yogi, I can't wait to see your annotated version of the text. Please, please, please do it. I'd love you to actually annotate the text that you've just written. I think we've just lost him. Are you still there, Yogi?
The one with all the references included, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Yogi, did you try to tell us what you're not and to define your boundaries again? Very interesting in that under these circumstances. There's a comment in the chat. This zone process is multidisciplinary and integrative. It sounds like E.O. Wilson's process in his book Consilience, representing the marriage of philosophy, science, and art. This forces us to see alternative perspectives that is exciting and refreshing.
Mhm.
Thanks a lot. Başak, you already thanked for that. You want to comment on that?
I have one more thing to underline, which is the term improvisation, because during this time, and of course I will be asking Bronwyn to reflect on it, but during this process, we really welcomed all the accidents and improvised nice like accidents, and not only accidents, but every kind of improvisation. And of course, like I think Bronwyn will be saying more interesting, will be raising more interesting points about the process and improvisation and accident because of what she has been producing during the performance. But I can also just like address one thing. For instance, the music that you keep hearing at the background, both for Yogi and then with my response. Indeed, it's not a piece that we selected. It's exactly the piece that my daughter was constantly playing when I was trying to concentrate and talk, because she was rehearsing at home. And because of pandemic, you're always in this small environments where you have to share. And then at the end, I said, okay, like I keep hearing this song. It's Chopin, and why don't we use it as well? So things are happening, and we are welcoming them. And then there are very nice marriages out of this as well. Just to kind of reflect on Janet's remark. But now I want to leave the ground to Bronwyn, because I think what she has been producing is so interesting all through this time, and every time it's unique, and there's a lot of role of improvisation there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think improvisation as a way of entering a collective way of thinking is a really significant tool, and performing artists and people who stage things know this well. It's their set of tools, and it's how they enter. And so it's something that I wondered how I would bring it to kind of my own art practice. Also, I think with the knowledge that I tend in myself and in my personality to want to really control and measure and give a kind of a unit to what I produce. And so I'm deliberately pushing myself out of that control, and where my hand and my eye and the relationship between the two only has so much it can do before I open the image. And I think that there was just something really interesting that happened tonight again. And again, it's about the mistake or the chance. Just before our lecture, I printed out a new copy of Yogi's text as the script, because I had written all over the previous copy over the last weeks, and it was a mess that I couldn't make sense of. And I'd highlighted so many times and given myself exclamation marks that it was impossible to follow what was in fact significant or happening in the text. So I decided fresh copy for the performance, and I printed it out and had it on my desk, feeling very confident about that. And then discovered halfway through that my printer had skipped and it cut off, and I lost 2 pages. And suddenly I had to rely on my memory. And I was, in terms of where I would be, and I was thrown off the pattern that I was constructing for myself in terms of opening and closing. And it was definitely the most exciting moment, and one that I'd like to go back to. And I think that, again, you know, there's this, you realize these resources within yourself the moment you push yourself into a kind of improvisational mode. And those resources are ones that don't sit in your conscious, in that part of your brain that has a kind of fixed identity of self. They sit elsewhere. If there's a brain scientist in the room, somebody who has a much deeper understanding, they'll be able to articulate this in a much more eloquent way. But there's parts of your thinking that suddenly activate when under pressure and forced to respond. And they reveal things to you and to your collaborators that are otherwise not revealed.
Regarding the time, I'd like to raise a final question to you before saying some goodbye words. So this is the very last question, and you can decide who wants to answer. In a brief way, maybe. Who is Alexis?
Who's going to take that one?
Well, we all smiling because the problem is we don't know. We've come across Alexis van Kleun in various references, and even found some objects and photographs that apparently are tributes to this person. But we've been inspired by some of these references, and we are searching at the moment. So part of our research is to actually understand Alexis van Kleun a bit better. Yeah, if anybody in the audience has come across Alexis van Kleun, we'd really like to invite kind of any links or references or comments. Please send us mails or whatever. But it's a research project that as an artist is really exciting, because obviously this person was some type of researcher, explorer, artist. I actually don't know, because we found quite a few references. So yeah, we're working on it. And we actually just had a discussion before we earlier today about how we'd like to package some of the research and present it in a future session. So watch the space, and hopefully we can shed some light on Alexis van Kleun, because we are looking for that too.
So thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing your vulnerabilities and inspirations with us tonight. Thanks to everyone for joining Pint of Science Festival. And yeah, please visit the website pintofscience.at, engage with the festival team via social media, and please contact the Zone and the Touch team, of course. There is yet another Pint of Science event to come tomorrow. It's going to be on language and identity, amongst others, and tissue regeneration. So yeah, I invite you to visit the website and register. That's it from my side. Some goodbye words from the artists or the curator.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Marie, and thank you, Lisa, for initiating this and holding it. It's really exciting to be part of it and to witness everything that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. And also an extended thank you to everyone that joined us tonight. And
yep.
Yeah. Hope we can see you again and again and again and again as we've been getting cross with Alexis, with you as well in future. Yeah.
The process is developing, and I put the website of the project. It's pretty empty still, but as I said, it's a process that will be filling up gradually over the next few weeks and months, hopefully. So check it out. Thank you very much.